ReviewTechUSA is a content creator that I tend to respect most of the time, heavily due to how much they helped me out during the debacle that shall go unnamed. But there is a major problem with his content from time to time. He simply doesn't know what he's talking about on a technical level, and yet still tries to lecture other people all the time on those topics. And today we're going to be looking at the perfect example of him doing this, as he uploaded a video gloating about how right he was when stating the Xbox Series S will be a bottleneck for the current generation of consoles because a character artist for Surgeon Simulator / I Am Fish stated it was. I mean this without any malice towards the teams who worked on those games, but they are not qualified to be talking about technical bottlenecks in any way, shape or form. None of the games made by the guy Rich is heavily relying on to make this video would have ever come close to reaching a bottleneck in literally any system, unless it was from the late 90s, especially when those two games specifically are incredibly unimpressive from a technical standpoint in every way, shape and form, and one of them has slightly questionable optimization. I mean, just look at the recommended specs on Steam for I Am Fish. On what planet should this game need a 2060 to run at the recommended level from the developers? Not to mention how the quote-unquote developer Rich is quoted in this video is not an actual developer. Rich claims he's a visual effects artist. Those are not the same thing and they do not deal with the same stuff, so without further delay, I'll let his awful video play and we'll rip it apart together.
The Xbox Series S. I actually secretly love the console now, which isn't a secret because I've been very public about my love for the Xbox Series S. But in the beginning, and well, my fears were justified, I had concerns about its limited compute power. I'm like, this console has actually slightly less compute performance than the PS4 Pro.
I have absolutely zero idea how you came to this conclusion outside of you unironically listening to well-known console fanboys on Twitter and promoting them occasionally in videos. But this quite literally is factually incorrect across every single possible front. There is no aspect of the PS4 Pro that outperforms the Xbox Series S at all. From an architecture standpoint to just any standpoint, you are simply factually incorrect here. The Series S is far more powerful than the PS4 Pro in every single way, and don't I remember you defending the Series S from Boogie2988's video where he claimed it was worse than an Xbox One X or equivalent? Yeah, you might want to keep that same energy. Honestly, I don't even know why I'm making these arguments myself, because I can just play his old video responding to Boogie2988 claiming it was as powerful as an Xbox One and claiming that it was a scam that people should never buy in order to disprove his own points. So I guess I'll see you guys in a minute.
Christ almighty in heaven. I don't even know where to begin. All he did, what it seems like, is that he's like, oh, Xbox One X, 6 teraflops of compute performance. Xbox Series S, 4 teraflops. Oh, it's a mistake. That had to be all you did, Steven. You are 150% wrong. 150% wrong. The Series S is more powerful than the Xbox One X. Yes, you may have less compute performance, but you have to realize that lower compute performance is based on newer technology, RDNA 2. You do realize, Boogie, that even though it's only a 1440p 120 FPS console, which you can't get any higher than 60 out of the Xbox One X, that the Xbox Series S for $299 has ray tracing hardware baked into it. You do realize that those Zen 2 cores in the Xbox Series S absolutely blow away the 8 horrible Jaguar cores that are in the Xbox One X, right? You do realize that the storage inside of the Xbox Series S is the same tech that's in the Xbox Series X, which is way faster than the slow storage that's built into the Xbox One X, right? You looked into all this, right? You just saw 4 teraflops, you saw no disk drive, and just said, yep, Xbox One X is more powerful. I just see that 6 teraflop, and there's only 4 teraflops on the Series S. Gonna make a video on it. That's all you did. I've made mistakes before in videos, I admit that, but this was like 2 seconds worth of research mistake.
I mean, come on Rich, this was barely 2 years ago and it's not like anything has changed in your favor. Quite the opposite in fact. As you guys will see later in the video, a lot of the issues he's talking about developers quote unquote discuss have already been addressed by Microsoft or just flat out misinformation, like what he's talking about from the I Am Fish VFX artist. Like, if you don't want people to keep on making the Rich Tomorrow memes, then stop doing this shit, because this is exactly what people are talking about when they make those memes. Your takes seem to be whatever they need to be in order to get the most clicks, at least when it comes to the technology side of things.
And it's now considered a current gen or next gen console. What's going to happen down the line when games push the hardware more? When less games are cross-generation? What's going to happen with the Xbox Series S then?
No one should really have to tell you this, Rich, but here we are. What's obviously going to happen is we will either see poorly optimized titles launch on the system like Gotham Knights, or we will simply see titles drop the resolution on the Series S and or graphical fidelity. I know you're clearly not a technical guy, Rich, but come on, this is a beyond pathetic amount of technical knowledge for someone who covers technology and gaming so much. If you had the slightest inkling of technical know-how, you'd know Microsoft designed the system around this issue specifically. It's the whole reason as to why the Series S has the same CPU as the Series X, just clocked 0.2 MHz per second slower, but a worse GPU than in the Xbox Series X. As the lower the resolution in high demanding games, the more intensive they become on the CPU. Also, on the graphical fidelity front, the only actual bottleneck that may occur is from the memory. But again, simple optimization techniques can solve that very quickly, which is why Techland backtracked on their bullshit anti-Series S claims from when Dying Light 2 launched, and now it runs fantastic on the system because they implemented basic optimization. Ironically being something you called out Techland for not even a year ago, in defense of the Series S. What you're seemingly forgetting about here is that this is not a 4K system. This is a 1440p/1080p gaming machine. For that, it is built perfectly.
And a lot of people, even people who develop games, got very angry at me for saying that. But guess what? The armchair engineer was right. The Xbox Series S is a bottleneck and is going to hold back the 9th generation unless Microsoft changes its mind and says that games are not required to be developed for both the Series S and Series X.
I'm not going to lie, Rich, this seems like a really desperate attempt from you to prove that you were correct because you're salty that you just got something wrong, and something wrong that you've disagreed with in the past. When you're self-admittedly not listening to actual game developers, but instead strawmanning by listening to VFX artists and character artists on Twitter who lock their accounts and delete their accounts over the backlash they got for spreading false information, which is what you're doing right now, is incredibly hard to take this video as anything else other than you being salty you got something wrong on a topic before, especially with the way you're antagonizing the viewer for no reason here.
So video effects artist Ian McClure, who worked on the Xbox Series X and S game I Am Fish at Bossa and also on the Surgeon Simulator series, was sitting down with Jeff and said that, yeah, the Xbox Series S is going to be a big problem for this generation.
If this video was some weird attempt to discredit yourself, Rich, you did a fantastic job in all honesty. Because how the fuck are you going to listen to a I Am Fish and Surgeon Simulator VFX artist about the Series S being a fucking bottleneck? Are you listening to yourself right now? The games this person has worked on would have never even come close to experiencing any kind of bottleneck on any system. You could take one from 2014 and it would have run on them. Well, at least it should. If these studios have ever come across bottlenecking on the Series S whilst developing fucking Surgeon Simulator, they seriously need to quit making games because they have got to be some of the most unskilled developers in the industry. But we both know they never did because this is the VFX artist just making shit up. And he goes on to talk about how Ian has been stating that other developers have been in meetings with Microsoft trying to get the requirement of games to run on both the Series S and Xbox Series X no matter what removed. But the only developers that have ever publicly stated this are ones who are uncredible, or at best have backtracked on what they said. So any references to the Ian guy, I'm just going to cut out the video because there is no credible information backing what he's saying, other than simple rumors with absolutely no basis in reality. It's also noteworthy that this is a VFX artist for Iron Fish, a not very successful game, and Surgeon Simulator, a mildly successful game. The likelihood of a VFX artist for these two games that is not well known at all, having any insider information or sources to what other developers and especially AAA developers are pushing for, because let's face it, those are the only ones Microsoft will listen to, is near to none, especially because he's not even a developer, he's a VFX artist. And despite what Rich may believe, those are not the same thing.
Now we talked about how 4A Games, who brought Metro Exodus to the Series S, said the GPU presents challenges for future games. Axel Knighting of id Software said this back in 2020. I know I've quoted this a bunch of times before, but it's still very pertinent. Also, it always scaled on PC is nonsense. Every AAA game in the past decade or so has their assets made once so they run on a minimum spec. Increasing sample counts a bit here and there for high settings isn't what you could truly have done with more power. Minimum spec matters.
There are so many issues with what Rich is bringing up here, but to begin with, I'll just mention the fact that none of these developers have the same complaints. Absolutely none of them. They are all over the place, and frankly, a lot of them just don't make sense. And before I rip into any developers here, I want to mention the fact that the complaint from id Software has already been addressed by Microsoft, as recently they freed up a significant portion of the RAM inside the Series S to alleviate the issues these developers were experiencing, and so far, it appears to have worked. Also, the developer from 4A Games that was quote-unquote trashing the Series S was not particularly trashing the Series S. They were in fact just talking about how the renderer inside their game engine is built around 4K, and if they were to tune down settings, their game engine would need adjustments, and a lot of them, which is not an issue with the console, it is an issue with their game engine. So your main argument point, the Surgeon Simulator VFX artist, is already just uncredible when it comes to optimization and bottlenecks, because he's never worked on a game that would ever come close to bottlenecking a system, and your other arguments built upon id Software's statements, which were purely speculative by the way, and 4A Games' statements do not benefit your argument at all, because id Tech's have been addressed and 4A Games' issues were an engine issue, not a console issue.
So I'm gonna make a prediction. If Microsoft caves to developers' demands because they're afraid that developers may say, okay, we're just not going to bring any games to the Series S or X if you force us to make games for the Series S because we don't want your weak hardware holding us back, Microsoft is going to change the requirement. They're going to say, all right, you don't need to make the games for the Series S anymore.
I honestly never thought I'd need to explain to someone that developers aren't just going to ditch the Xbox platform if their games are selling well on there. That's just not going to happen. It makes no sense from a business standpoint to do that. Also, id Software are quite literally owned by Microsoft now, so if anyone's not going to have issues optimizing for the system anymore, it's going to be them. And if by some supposed miracle they do remove the requirement to make games both for the Series S and X, that is not going to cause us to get better games. That is going to cause the complete opposite thing to happen. The Series S is next gen compared to the old systems, and your own previous statements have blatantly shown that. Without the supposed bottleneck of the Xbox Series S's memory constrictions that have been addressed, and frankly you can easily adjust for in that specific version of the game with minimal issues, all you're going to see is worse optimized games. You're not going to see 99% of developers take advantage of that hardware. You're just going to end up with more and more Gotham Knights games, and those will be significantly amplified. The idea that you can't have a next-gen game running on the Xbox Series S is just a flat-out lie. If Cyberpunk 2077 can run at 60 FPS on the Series S, there's no excuse for any other games. The differences between the Series S and X are not big enough to be causing these insane issues like you're claiming. Now, there's not actually anything else for me to respond to in his video because he just goes on an insane rant about how there's enough developers complaining about this issue to actually get Microsoft to drop the requirement, and if that happens, the Series S is dead, despite that having a very, very slim chance of ever happening because of the financial success it's causing Microsoft. Not only that, but in this fantasy land of riches, he's claiming that the Series S will just be killed off if games are Xbox Series X only. That is not true. What would happen is they'd offer those games on the Series S through cloud gaming. Although again, the likelihood of that ever happening is near zero, and so it's just a topic that's pointless to talk about, and none of the evidence he's provided actually backs up what he's saying. In fact, he's argued against the exact argument he's making repeatedly in the past. So with all that being said, I have no hate for Ridge. He simply needs to do more research, like he told Boogie2988 that he should have done. Simple Google searches would have debunked everything Ridge is saying here, but again, he should have just done the research. And with that being said, we have come to the end of the video, so please do not forget to do all the things YouTubers love to beg you to do, aka check out the Discord server, the Twitter, as well as like, comment and subscribe, so I will see you all in the next video.